Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us. Nathan is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. Thank you, Nathan. And if you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call. 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line 605-477-3249. Off-grid Montana, Rich Scheben's back. Welcome back, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Mr. Finelli. How are you doing?
I am well. Have you lost weight on your extravaganza? Out there in the cold?
Probably not. I usually stay about 205 on a regular basis. It's tough to lose weight. I usually fast 1 or 2 days a month. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about doing that this week. Maybe I'll drop about 1.5 pounds. But,
hey, you want to tell us where you've been?
Well, sure. I mean, it's no secret when people go to my website that I'm into the outdoors and nature. I give tours in edible medicinal plants. I have a big garden, grow my own produce, raise animals, live off the grid with no hot water heater, pressure tank, interior pipes, and enjoy living rugged and in nature. And obviously, I harvest my own meat and fish as well. And I was on a hunting trip, and I got a nice young meat moose, and already gave away 50% of it, as I always do. And we spent this weekend finishing up some canning, and I also have a buddy's freezer. I put some of the backstrap steaks in. We ate the tenderloins in moose camp when I harvested the bull. And, that's kind of my lifestyle, if you will, is being as self-sufficient as I possibly can and keeping away from hormones, steroids, antibiotics, pesticides, just anti-GMO in general. So, of course, we eat out at a restaurant now and then. We go to people's homes for dinner and stuff. But generally speaking, I do everything in my power to eat meat that is as healthy as possible, low cholesterol, that's lean and delicious.
Very good. Rich, I have, let me just say this. Barry Soetoro, some of you may know him by another name, Barack Hussein Obama. Many people we know don't like him, don't like his actions, don't like his policies very much. And many people think that he sold us out, that he initiated widespread spying and surveillance and flat out lied to us. Well, here's an article that was emailed to me. I received this, and it just illustrates about how some other people feel about him. Now, I have not found the source for this email, but I can read it on the air. It says December 3rd, 2018. Former President Obama addressed a major gathering of the American Indian Nation in upstate New York Monday. He spoke for an hour about his previous work increasing the Native American standard of living, and he referred to how, as president, he had signed every piece of Native American legislation that came to his desk. Although President Obama was vague about the details of his achievements, he seemed enthusiastic and spoke eloquently about his ideas for helping his red sisters and brothers. At the conclusion of the speech, the New York tribes presented Obama with an award plaque inscribed with his Indian name, walking eagle. The president said that he would bring the plaque with him this week on his way to the funeral of President Bush 41, and he would show it off to his fellow ex-presidents expected to be in attendance. A Fox News reporter later asked the group of Indian tribe leaders how they came to select the new name that they had given to the president. The chief answered that walking eagle is the name that we give to a bird so full of blank it can no longer fly.
All righty then. Yeah.
So there is this image of, a whole bunch of people at this ceremony, and there's the chief with his headdress on, and there he is presenting former President Barack Hussein Obama with his plaque, with his new Native American name, Indian name, Walking Eagle. So I just thought that that was worth sharing with our class. I know you all appreciate that, and I think that he deserved that honor, Walking Eagle. So maybe we should, when we can, remember that and refer to former President Barack Hussein Obama, a.k.a. Barry Soetoro, as, his Native American name, Walking Eagle. Okay. Rich, what do you have for our class today?
Well, I have probably about 8 hours worth of stuff, which obviously I won't be able to go through 1/100th of it as usual, but I often say, and I'm blunt on this, that the American people and the Western world and the whole world, in a sense, we've been force-fed a Marxist, Alinsky, Frankfurt School, Cloud and Peasant Communist Manifesto sandwich. Being drunk on Kool-Aid and group identity politics has been some of the biggest weapons and very successful weapons that the elite use to control the masses of people. And they use things like Agenda 21, Agenda 30, words like humanitarian and sustainable city and global warming and climate change. Basically, what it boils down to for approximately the bottom 93% of income earners is a loss of individual rights. And this sets the stage for government interventions, confiscation, and redistribution of wealth from the elite or from the middle class and the bottom 93% to the elite. So here's an article right here titled How to Create a Socialist State by Saul Alinsky. Somebody actually published this in the paper. I'm sure most of this audience has probably read this. Once in a while, the Patriot will publish certain things that are beneficial for the average Joe to read and relearn. And there's basically, I want you to remember that Hillary Clinton did her college thesis on the writings of Saul Alinsky. And he died, a little over, early 70s, somewhere in there. And if you don't think this stuff is happening today in our country, you definitely are drunk on the Kool-Aid of political correctness. But think about the 8 levels of control that Alinsky says must be obtained in order to create a socialist state. What socialist basically means is not much difference than any of the words: communism, authoritarianism, dictatorships. It's all top-down, centralized control with no accountability from the governing body. And these 8 criteria are: 1, healthcare. Control healthcare, and you control the people. 2, poverty. Increase the poverty level as poor as possible. Poor people are easier to control and will not fight back if you are willing to provide everything for them to live. And this is published in a paper, a newspaper, years ago by a patriot. 3, debt. Increase the debt to an unsustainable level. That way you're able to increase taxes, and this will provide more poverty. 4, gun control. Remove the ability to defend themselves from the government the way you are able to create a police state. And I am quoting. 5, welfare. Take control of every aspect of their lives, food, housing, and income, etc. 6, education. Take control of what people read and listen to. Take control of what children learn in school. 7, religion. Remove the belief of God from government and schools. 8, class welfare. Divide the people into basically the wealthy and the poor. Implication there is getting rid of the middle class. So, does any of this sound familiar, America? You know, Alinsky merely simplified Lenin's original theme for world conquest by communism and domination under Russian rule. Lenin, and I've quoted this on the air before, said, "Give me your children for 4 years, and I will socially indoctrinate them." And I'm paraphrasing. It was a lengthier statement. But that's exactly what all they need is 4 years. And Stalin described his converts as useful idiots. So the reason why I am mentioning this is because of all this political correctness that we're forced fed, and group identity politics. All whites are bad. All men are bad. All this, all that. But you know what? All these people who are saying this own self-incrimination stations, like Zuckerberg's Facebook, who says everybody who's on his Facebook page are dumb effers. But they never talk about all these other very pale white people, like Zuckerberg and Zucker and Rothschild and Gates and Rockefeller and Jonathan Gruber, one of the creators of Obamacare, who said the American people are stupid, or Jeff Bezos or Soros or Murdoch or Clinton. No, because they're after the poor and middle class. They're after the bottom 93%. And their game plan with political correctness, their blueprint is to distract, dumb down, and divide us by groups. Every group possible. Race, gender, sex, religion, ideology, generation, they don't care. They're going for it all. And it's all meant to make us submissive and break our will. And this is why I always say read up, research up, speak up, and vote up. We have to think for ourselves, because everything out there is propaganda, media propaganda, subliminal messaging in every movie, in every pitch, in every gesture on the mainstream media. It's professional wordsmithing. It's Hegelian dialectic. It's meant to insult, degrade, and disrespect every group, which lowers the bars of standards and expectations, especially for work. When that happens, a nation goes down, and we are at the cusp. Vince?
We'll be right back. Rich Scheben, offgridmontana.com. The death of President George Bush, who's 94 years old. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think everybody who listens to this program knows that he was a mouthpiece for the New World Order. And he has quite a few quotes in the annals of history regarding that. And as we can all see, whether it be using Alinsky, Marx, Cloward, and Piven, doesn't matter. Anybody who's for the globalist regime is not for the average Joe American. And you can see with the loss of wealth, savings, freedoms, liberty, increased debt. I mean, our debt, corporate debt is through the roof. We had a yield curve inversion. In fact, I checked the 3 and 5 year this morning. Maybe it's only 1 basis point, but it's still inverted. Basically, when you have yield curve inversions, and we've talked about economy in many different areas for many different shows, it basically means that credit is collapsing. And when you dovetail it with the household, corporate, government, and global debt that we have, and the uncertainty of fiat currencies and everything else, it's pretty obvious that the globalists have destroyed opportunity and prosperity and the ability to control one's own destiny for the little people. And again, the little people is about 93%. So I'm not trying to disrespect the U.S. president. I'm just trying to make it very clear that we need the silent majority to become American and not hyphenated, because the powers that be are using us and poisoning us against ourselves in order to divide and conquer our nation, traditions, heritage, culture. And as that occurs, especially when we basically accelerate the fact that we lose our ability, our appreciation and value for work, because people are getting a job and keeping a job based on what group they're in lieu of hard work, effort, proven results, qualifications, job performance, etc. There's no incentive to learn, to get better, for anything. And I think the globalist regime, like some of the names of white males that I mentioned earlier, have totally destroyed the Western world, and we're trying to get it back. We're clawing. It's not. They use terms, politically correct buzzwords terms, like I can't think of one right now. But basically, the American people are surviving. You know, when we hear terms like equality, fairness, tolerance, diversity, inclusiveness, all these words have been hijacked by definition to use as tools to divide the American people. And, populism, that's the word I was thinking of. You know, it's not populism. People are trying to survive, and 80% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And the little guy is not, never mind no one sticking up for him, but there's no rights under the law, there's no restitution under the law, there's no protection under the law for the little guy. And the whole system is designed so the bottom 93% combat and fight each other. Infighting and chaos is their MO. And we have to realize that as long as we stay hyphenated Americans and take our eye off the ball, because every message from the mainstream media gets sanctioned. That means approved. I don't mean to be condescending by mentioning a definition here, but what we need to do as American people is realize that we've been used, we've been duped, we've been played. And after you're done talking about this topic, I would love to go on to a very important article that I just read this morning, Vince, on basically a subset of political correctness and how this has all been planned for the extraction of the American dream, culture, and traditions. Vince?
Okay. Yeah. Let's do that. But first, let's give George H.W. Bush, former president of the United States, credit for what he's done. He was the guy who signed off on dropping 177 million pounds of bombs on Iraq, and Iraq occupied Kuwait. His signature got 158,000 Iraqis killed, 13,000 casualties, 70,000 people died from the destruction of the damage of the electrical and the sewage system there. We were talking about Facebook a few minutes ago, and there's an article from the Business Insider. This is dated October 2013. Mark Zuckerberg just spent more than $30 million buying four neighboring houses for privacy. That's the headlines. So Zuckerberg bought 4 houses because he wanted to protect his privacy, and at the same time, Facebook was removing yet another privacy feature. So it now seems to me that privacy is something that you have to be quite wealthy to afford. What did I do? I dumped Zuckerberg. I don't want anything to do with him. I no longer have a Zuckerberg account. No more Facebook for Vinny. So what that means is that I cannot post, what the broadcasts are about, who I'm speaking with, who I'm talking with, who's hosting the show, and what the topics are. No more. No more. No more Zuckerberg. So you can do the same thing too, class. You can throw him overboard. And think about it. Why would you want to post your vacation? Why would you want to post images of you? Why would you want to post things that you want to share with friends out there in cyberspace so that parasites can use them for whatever purposes they want without your permission or with your permission, unknowingly. Yesterday I was at Sam's Club, and I happened to chat with a guy in line in front of me, and he was he identified himself as a guy who was in charge of technology for a public school training camp. And I said, well, what do you think about Microsoft? And he kind of looked at me and said, you know what we're doing? We're using Google Chrome books. Those are inexpensive notebooks, if you will, that have the Google operating system on them. They're wireless. And he said, they're so cheap, that's what we're using. I said, what about privacy? What about tracking? And he said, well, kind of shrugged his shoulders, like, what are you going to do? He said, yeah, we know about it, but what are you going to do? Well, what are you going to do? When I was a technology consultant, I actually built the systems. I didn't go to Google or Apple and say, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing in this job. Can you sell some stuff that, will make my life easy? I didn't do that. I literally designed the system to keep parasites and peeping toms out. That's what I did. And I said to this particular technology director, what about Linux? What about open source? What about free? We just use Google Chromebooks. Think about that. That's just one case, right? One case in a big city. Well, not a big city, medium-sized city, where the technology people just turn over your children's privacy to cyberspace. Think about that. Why would you allow that? So how do you stop it? Well, what you do is you run for the school board, and then you start speaking up, and you start saying to your fellow school board members who are probably as dumb as a box of rocks, here's what's going on. We're not going to do this. We're not going to allow this spying technology to be in our face. We're not going to allow these Chromebooks to come into our homes where theoretically, and I'm sure it actually happens, that the cameras and the microphones are turned on just to see what's happening at home. Think about that. Mm-hmm. It's happened. Notebooks have been, the cameras and the microphones have been turned on. I believe the city was Philadelphia that did that. They sent notebook computers home, and they were spying on the homes from school. School people were spying, just, see what's going on in Johnny's house. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine? Mm-hmm. Can you imagine? When Rich Scheben, when men were men, if that happened, a father would just walk out the door, go to that guy's house, and beat the tar out of him. Mm-hmm. Now we have... Now, Vince, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was right.
I got to jump in here, and because today the father's pretty much been kicked out of the home because of political correctness, and whether you call it eighth wave feminism or the war on men, which Candace Owens talks about publicly in every venue she can. It goes to the, and this is why Google has gotten into our schools, okay? Because you kick the men out of the house. This is all part of the Alinsky, Marxist, Cloward and Piven, Communist Manifesto, Frankfurt School. That's what they talk about. And then now, and what's going to happen to the women because of Sharia law or Chinese rule in America is going to be awful. Now, talking about objective facts, like when you were talking about Bush, you mentioned all objective facts. See, the powers that be, big tech, don't want objective facts. They want to change definitions of common American words, change traditions, culture, history, heritage. They want to bring in censorship and surveillance. And this is why, what do we do about it? I think homeschooling is the best way to combat all of this. Everything from sexualizing children to there's so much despair out there. Here in Montana, granted these are per capita numbers, but we're the highest in the country for meth and suicides. Now, granted, that's the asterisk. I know everybody's saying, well, that's per capita. It doesn't mean much. The fact that we live in the best state in the world with all this great hunting and fishing, all this nature, all this hiking, all this camping, and the fact that this is occurring is very sad. And we can do a whole show on that. But, Vince, if I may, can I go through a few articles real quick?
Yeah, in just 1 second. What qualifications do you need to homeschool your child? In many cases, it's just a high school diploma or a GED and commitment and the desire to follow through, to go to your school board office and say, we're going to be homeschooling. They'll say, well, you've got to fill out this form. Hey, okay. Consider doing that. We did it. The Finelli family did it. It works. Our children are fine. And here's what you're going to hear. Well, what about socialization? How are your children going to be socialized if they don't go to the public training camp? And here's what I said. Quote, why would I want my children to associate with a bunch of thugs? End quote. Simple as that. Rich, please continue.
Yeah, well, it's basically social indoctrination. I'm just going to mention 6 titles of articles that have been recently in the news. And I don't need to go into much detail, but I will go into some detail when I get to the 7th article that I printed out this morning. A top claim in the newest U.S. climate report rules on research tied to major Democratic donors. Okay? Not a good look is one of the quotes. Next article. Senator promotes flu, gets sick at the age of 47, or promotes the flu shot, gets sick at the age of 47 and then dies. Next, Tom Arnold thinks there are only 5 black NRA members. See? Divide and conquer. Group identity politics. It happens from the mainstream media and the bought and paid for Hollywood people and certain actors and singers and athletes every 5 minutes in this country. Wells Fargo, saying we tell the truth was so absurd we can't be sued for lying about it. Next article. Grooming gangs targeted Sikh girls for decades. Police frozen by political correctness. Now, is that really helping the women's movement, the Me Too movement? Now, I'm going to get to that in a little bit, couple of seconds here. Yale studies find that white liberals dumb down the vocabulary when speaking to black people. Every one of these articles are subsets under political correctness. Political correctness is not just affirmative action and quotas and not just telling an off-colored joke in the hallway. There's thousands of subsets under political correctness. Now, here's an article that came out titled, Wall Street's New Rule is, quote, avoid women at all costs. Avoid women at all costs. No more dinners with female colleagues. I'm reading some of the quotes from this article. Don't sit next to them in flights. I'm having a hard time reading it because it's printed out very small, so please bear with me. Don't book hotel rooms or if you do book hotel rooms, book them on different floors and avoid one-on-one meetings. In fact, as a wealth advisor put it, just hiring a woman these days is an unknown risk. What if she took something he said the wrong way? So this Kavanaugh effect from this Me Too movement is backfiring big time. Quote, if men avoid working or traveling with women alone or stop mentoring women for fear of being accused of sexual harassment, he said, these men are going to back out of a sexual harassment complaint and right into a sexual discrimination complaint. And I'm going to get a new pair of glasses here because I'm having a hard time reading. Pardon me, folks. And I'm going to make a few comments in between these quotes from this article. And one is, there was a great article that I've mentioned on the air a few times, and it was titled, "Here is Why the Women's March is Awful for Women" by Rachel Tripp. She mentioned about how women are becoming patsies, corrupted by big government, and their goal is to elect Democrats. How women are being used and disrespected. And even Condi Rice was worried about women turning out to be snowflakes and infants, and men would not want to have them around. This is all backfiring because the elite are using this sanctioned strategy to divide the American people. You have been used.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk a little bit more about that after the break, Vince.
Rich, I have a feeling you had a chance to look at the news about General Motors and how it's laying off about 15,000 people and closing about 6 manufacturing plants. Well, in automotive news, or autonews.com, there's an article that it looks like, well, let me just read this quote. I can't. My computer's locked up. Microshaft. Well, it looks like there may be as many as 25,000 people who lose their jobs as a result of Ford's restructuring.
Mm-hmm.
25,000 more. So we've got the 15,000 from General Motors, and then we have potentially 25,000 more for Ford. How does that happen? We were the automotive capital of the world. And through the stupidity of top management, making bonehead decisions, not realizing when fuel economy was important, we built the wrong size. The Japanese came in with the Datsun, and which is Nissan, and other brands like Honda. They came out with reliable automobiles, and they ate our lunch. They ate our lunch. If you look at the brands that are the most reliable, you can go anywhere and look at, automobile reliable brands on the internet. You'll find that most of the top 10, if not all of the top 10, are Asian. Can you imagine that? And even Mercedes-Benz isn't in the top 10. It's absolutely true. So Ford lost its way, and GM with their CEO, Mary Barra. Boy, what a mistake that was. I don't think she has a clue what's going on. And if you look at what's going on with these trucks, I drive a pickup truck. I drive a full-size pickup truck, and you drive a pickup truck. Well, my pickup truck is plenty big. It will fit in a parking space. Well, these new pickup trucks that Ford, Dodge, Ram, and General Motors are making, they are so large now that they're intimidating. If you have one of those trucks, just a standard pickup truck behind you, they've got these big faces, these big grills. There's no need for that. These have the aerodynamics of a concrete block. Why would they do that? Why wouldn't they make a vehicle that's, the size that we really want? But now we have to appeal to pseudo-machoism. And that's what people are buying. And when someone gets behind the wheel of these great big trucks, they feel they own the road. And they drive even more aggressively, in my opinion. They'll fly up on my tail and kind of push me around. If I'm driving my little mid-sized Mercedes, my old 22-year-old Mercedes, they'll push me around. I don't like it. And there's no reason for these ginormous trucks. Not for the average guy. Come on. I do just fine with mine. You can put a 4x8 sheet of plywood in yours, can't you, Rich? I can.
Yeah. Well, Vince, if I could address that, first of all, we have trillions in debt with auto, credit card, and school loans individually here in America. people should be buying with cash these things. The only thing people should be taking loans out, I talk about it in the book, I mentioned on the air, and that's house and land only, period. That's it. Now, the burden on the American taxpayer, with 80% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, and 69% of Americans not even having $1,000 in savings. And on top of that, we have 63% of non-citizens on welfare. That's almost 5,000 million households. Programs used to help ailing American citizens. Well, the burden on the American citizens is so great with their debt and illegal immigration that they're broke. They're tapped out. And that's what you get. You get the stress and everything that goes with it.
When I was growing up, very, very young, my dad said, Vinny, if you want to buy something, you think you need it, you save up for it. And when you have enough money saved up, then you buy it. All set, cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Off-grid, Montana. Rich Scheben's with us. Rich, what's next on your list?
Well, let me finish talking about that article about how Me Too is backfiring and how the Wall Street new rule is to avoid women at all costs. And I'm hearing this from a lot of other corporations, not just in America, but around the Western world, because divide and conquer is one of the main strategies of the elite. So that being said, too many people don't realize that when you lower the bars and standards and expectations for getting a job or keeping a job based on what group you're in, you don't empower a nation, an individual, or a group. You destroy them. And this is what is happening. And I'll read another quote from this article. Being accused of sexual discrimination is nothing compared to being falsely accused of rape. So don't expect this trend to reverse. Next quote. It's amazing how many empowered women, this is in quotes, seamlessly transition into damsels in distress whenever it suits them. Now, Candace Owens talks publicly about the war on men, and I've talked about these issues many times because I connect the dots with financial, economic, social, and political consequences, but because of what divide and conquer does to the American people, and that being, Sharia law. We are heading as a country, if we don't start chewing up and spitting out political correctness, all subsets, we're going to be either under Sharia law or Chinese rule. Now, Chinese rule is basically UN rule. They've already, basically, there's too many people in these higher up positions that are bought and paid for. So when you look at birth rates, when you look at, 4 wives marrying children, female genital mutilation, there's no way, just from math, how the Western civilization, just from math alone, will survive. And I've quoted articles like less than 30% of men want to be married. The divorce rate in America is between 70 and 75% because they skew the statistics. They look at everything is anti-truth today. It's pro-propaganda, subliminal messaging, Hegelian dialectic. It's all made to be submissive and break the American people's will. People have to realize that it's a divide and conquer strategy. It's holding on to the narrative and talking points, which is sanctioned by the elite. Now, when they talk about marriage statistics, they go for, they take things like, 50% of people, especially in the older generation, which is a totally different, that was a heritage and tradition of teamwork. And that's not the case anymore. Today, it's a divide and conquer strategy where hard work, effort, proven results, qualifications, job performance, etc., no longer means anything. So when you look at, they say marriage stats is divorce rates 50%, they look at how many people in the older generation stayed married. But if you look at all the people who get married and then all the people who get divorced, it's between 70 and 75%. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Actually, marriage statistics, successful marriage statistics is going to increase because of these algorithms that they throw into the formula. For example, millennials are too young to get divorced, the few that are married, to skew those statistics. And the number one growth, when you look at older folks, number one growth through 2050 is the old people. So they had older traditions, which means less divorce because there was less divide and conquer and more qualifications, job performance, etc. Today, that means nothing. So when you look at all the men who've been kicked out of their homes, lost their children, the state-run basically are the fathers, of course there's going to be less than 30% of men wanting to get married. And then you got to look at the increase of Sharia law and mosques in the Western world, including the U.S., and at least 100 churches per week minimum being abolished. Again, it goes into the math. Now, then you got to look at what's the definition of marriage? Is it same sex? Is it identifying which gender you are? Well, there's 51 different genders as per de Blasio, mayor of New York City. Today in America, in the Western world, they're marrying pets, farm animals, trees, computers, and other inanimate objects. So the unit of measure and calculations for everything is basically to create chaos and infighting and division, basically so there's no change in the status quo. They want the little guy, the little people, the bottom 93%, the average Joe, that includes Josephines and Joannes, to be at each other's throats. That is the main strategy. Group identity politics, a.k.a. victim group status, a.k.a. protectionist group status. And this is why the elite dub this term as identity politics, because they don't want the people to figure it out. As per me going over Alinsky's 8 points, and what Lenin and Stalin says, and our elites, they call us useful idiots because we keep infighting against each other. Instead of raising the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job, we are lowering it based on what victim group you're in. How do you expect? No wonder why this Me Too movement is backfiring. We are heading towards Sharia law or Chinese/UN rule in America. And it's going to forget about words like prosperity, freedom, liberty, justice for all. Those words, because of what Vince was talking about with Google Books, will be eliminated or slowly through incrementalization. These words will be changed. And the bars of standards and expectations for everything will continue to get lower. Vince?
Well, as you said, the Google Chromebooks, I was just thinking about when I was a consultant back in the 1990s and through 2000s, that school systems were looking at what's easy for us. And that seems to be the operative word today. What's easy? If you listen to advertisements, easy payments, easy to do. It's so easy. Who said that it has to be easy? Who said that it can't be the right thing to do? And what I saw back in the 1990s, specifically 1991, 92, 93, was that there was a company they had a product called Success Maker. And it was CCC, Computer Curriculum Corporation. And what they had was software where a child could sit at a computer and it would track how well the student regurgitated what the student just read a few minutes before on the screen. So you read about it and then you answer a question. You read about it and you answer a question. You read about it and you answer a question. A multiple choice. And so the idea was independent learning without teachers. And initially the students loved it because it had colors. And I'm talking about kindergartners, first graders, second graders. And then the idea was, well, we could, instead of having teachers and expensive books, and the books only last about 7 years, what we can do is we can have these computers, because computers, you can learn history, and you can learn math, and you can learn science, and you can learn music. And boy, these computers can do a lot of things. You can put a set of headphones on a child and sit them in a room and let them look at a screen with a keyboard and a mouse, and the software, you can buy it. So it's so easy to do, and that's what's happened. We've turned over education to computers. And who's writing the software? So one company out in, let's say, the left coast can write some software, and then that software can be utilized throughout the entire country. So now you have education coming from one company. And if you want to rewrite history, one company can rewrite the history. Heck, who reads books today? I wanted to buy a book on a specific subject. And so I called a used bookstore. I thought, you know what? Books are really getting expensive. So I think it's worth maybe $10 to me to buy a book on this particular subject. And I want to have a book. I don't want to have this information on the internet. I want it when the internet goes down, I want to be able to open this book and read about this particular subject. Well, the bookstore, a large, very large used bookstore in Springfield, Missouri, didn't have this topic. I was kind of surprised. So I bought it on the internet. And what I'm finding out is that fewer and fewer people are reading books. Heck, why? Because you can have a tablet. You can have a notebook. You can read on your phone. You can have a Kindle. Okay? Why have a book? Heck, it took trailer load after trailer load after trailer load, literally. We have an 8-foot by 8-foot by 20-foot long race car trailer that I bought. I didn't buy it for a race car trailer. I just bought it because it was an enclosed trailer. It was the right size, and I could pull it with our truck, and I could move furniture in it. So I bought this used race car trailer. It holds about 7,000 pounds, and I could put furniture in it. I could put our antiques in it. I could move from Virginia to Missouri, trip after trip after trip, and that's what we did. That's how we moved all of our belongings. And I moved several trailer loads of books from Virginia to Missouri. Now, if they were electronic, I could have just sent them across the internet, all of them. You know, it might have taken a few days to transmit all that data, but I could have. But the point is, I wouldn't have it if the internet goes down. And if you think about it, you know, we think that, well, when there were floppy disks, we thought we could put our pictures on floppy disks, and they'll last forever. Really? Just take one of those floppy disks that you have pictures on. Try to find a floppy disk drive today on your computer. And if you have one, and it's an antique computer, you'll probably find the floppy drive doesn't work, and neither does the floppy diskette. And the same thing's going to happen with CD-ROMs. And the same thing's going to happen with DVDs.
This on several shows, including today, that give me your children for 4 years, and I'll basically be able to social indoctrinate them any way I can. And, of course, I'm paraphrasing. But just looking at what happened with me with Amazon, they basically have fixed the rankings of my book. They've literally eliminated several 5-star rankings about my book and added 1-star. I can't tell you how many dozens, if not hundreds of people have gone on and tried to put 5-star reviews, and they weren't allowed. I've literally been online seeing 5-star reviews being deleted by Amazon. I've literally seen my book say it's out of stock. I've literally seen my title of my book being misspelled, so search engines couldn't pick it up. This is the censorship surveillance that we see all over social media. You know, the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Twitter. And pretty soon, they will control all information and change history, and there will be no freedom left for the common man, for the average Joe, for approximately the bottom 93% of income earners. So this is why we need to read up, research up, and speak up, because if we don't stick together, well, we won't have an America, but survival will be in doubt. And I'm not trying to be dramatic here, but they have accelerated the surveillance, the censorship to the point where they are purposely not hiding it anymore. They're desperate, and they are doing everything. They're accelerating their program because they are seeing that the American people and the West is waking up from tyranny. So it's up to us to stick together and not be hyphenated Americans. When I say hyphenated Americans, hyphenated by gender, race, sex, sexual orientation, religion, ideology, generation. The powers that be, the elite, are doing everything to make us at each other's throats. And if we know this, and we can use objective facts and a little subjective emotional opinion in our arguments and debates, then maybe we stand a chance on bringing back America and having freedom. Because how would you like to have no freedom of speech? You know, Vincent Finelli allows me to come on this show and exercise my First Amendment rights. Rights that were given to me by over 1 million deceased patriots, heroes, who gave their life for our country. Young men who lied about their age, being 16, 17 years old, who stormed the beaches of Normandy so we can have the right for free speech, have the right to not be under tyrannical rule, have the right to have some type of weapon so we can protect ourselves and our families. And then Tom Arnold comes on the news and says, well, there's only 5 black people with the NRA. Basically, he's saying that's basically code for if you're black, you can't have a legal firearm. Now, if you're told how to act, who to vote for, what to say, what to do, and how to think, that is not freedom. And that's what the elite do. It's the aristocracy controlling the serfs. Not as much left-right paradigm as we all think. All right, folks, we'll be back after the break, and hopefully Vince Finelli will be back, and we'll continue the show. Thanks for holding.
So I enjoyed that last segment where Rich Scheben took over. I don't think you could hear me, Rich. I was speaking, and but you couldn't hear me, so you took over, and I just potted down my mic and sat back and relaxed for the rest of it. Thank you. Class, there are 2 things that I was able to accomplish when I was a consultant for the school system. One thing was I prevented wireless from being deployed in the public training camp, and I was very concerned about wireless communications, and I said to the principal and superintendent of schools, look, I don't want to be any part of causing cancer and disease and having children and teachers end up with these maladies as a result of wireless, because I am convinced that we will find out 15 years from now that wireless communications causes cancer. And I said that back in the 90s. Okay. The other thing that I was able to help prevent was the turning over of our education to educational corporations, the ones who write this software for these networks that we put in the school system, and we just have, instead of having teachers, what we do is we can hire less expensive people, and we'll call them lab instructors. And a lab instructor is someone who says, okay, I know how to power up the network. I know the passwords because you told me what they are. I can boot the computers, log them in so that the students can then use them for the rest of the day. And if they have a problem, they can raise their hand, and I can then call someone who can fix the computer. So instead of having a teacher, we have somebody like a babysitter in the classroom, someone to keep violence at a minimum in the classroom, someone who can say, okay, if you can't behave, you go into the office. So instead of teaching, we've turned over our education to corporations that write software. So if you want to rewrite history, you can rewrite it in one place. Okay? And let's contrast that. You can rewrite it at the software level, and then it gets released throughout the country to all those computers that are being used to babysit the students. Well, let's contrast that with what I saw in my life. And I mentioned my dad was a principal, he was a teacher, and he was an acting superintendent. Well, what he would do is in the summertime, he would order books for the library. My dad, the principal, would order the books for the library. And the teachers would have the opportunity to recommend books too. And they would be delivered to the school. And then for weeks, my dad would go through and read the books. He would look at them and see if he thought that they were suitable for the students in his school. See if they were accurate, to see if they represented what he believed to be the truth. I'm talking about a principal doing that. Now, can you imagine in today's world a school principal actually supervising the purchase of the materials used for instruction and actually reviewing them before the students and teachers got a chance to see them in the library? Okay, teachers could recommend them, and he recommended, purchases of the books that he thought should be used. But they didn't get their position on the library shelf, and they were not purchased until he approved them. And he didn't approve them until he read them. And then when it came to lesson plans, he would have all of his teachers, this was mandatory, they had to have a lesson plan of a rolling 30 days so that, and he would review them. He would either go to school or he'd bring them home and read every single lesson plan of every single teacher for a 30-day period. And then the next 30 days he would do the same thing, and the next 30 days he would do the same thing. And they had to have lesson plans that he approved of. So now we have a principal actually doing his job, right? That's what principals are supposed to do. Now, do you think today a school principal reads the lesson plans of teachers? And why did he have lesson plans 30 days in advance? Because if that teacher got sick or something happened, that teacher couldn't show up, another teacher could say, okay, here's where the teacher left off, and here's where we're going to continue. Continuity of learning, independent of the teacher. Plan B, right? That's the way it used to be. Is that the way it is today? I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. And what's the tenure of a school superintendent? About 3 years. Because in 3 years, the village says, whoa, another mistake. We hired this guy, and he's just worse than the last guy that we just got rid of. And what these superintendents do is they trade places. They go and blow up district after district after district with their incompetence. That's how it goes.
Uh-huh.
So we're not professionals anymore. We don't do the right thing. It's what's in it for us. And it's a disgrace. And that's how we got here. And if you look at the millennials and you say, wow, most of them don't know much about anything. How'd that happen? Well, because of their parents. Their parents have abandoned them. Why? In the pursuit of paying bills and buying more stuff they don't need. Driving themselves into debt. Because I guess their parents weren't smart enough to tell them, hey, don't buy it until you can afford it. Don't buy the payment, buy the car. Don't buy the payment, buy the car. And what do I drive? I don't know. The most expensive vehicle I bought in a long time was $3,000 to the penny. That's what I paid for my truck, my 2004 Chevrolet pickup truck, rust-colored, and that's what I paid for my 1996 Mercedes E300 diesel, $3,000 each. And that's the most I paid recently for a vehicle. Just a few thoughts. Rich?
Yeah, well, as far as the teaching thing goes, you look at every sitcom, every movie out there, the subliminal messaging about educators. Oh, you don't get paid much, even though they get paid quite a bit, with protection for the job from being fired, with a huge benefit package, with not working summers, and with a pension. So basically, they're subliminally telling the teachers, oh, you're not getting paid much, so just do the bare minimum. We'll handle the curriculum. And then they throw in political correctness, like, well, I don't want to, and the teacher says, well, I can't really do anything, just like the article about the police I mentioned, how Sikh women have been groomed by pedophiles and rapists for decades, is because the police, the teachers, they're afraid to be called racist, bigots, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, violent hater, conspiracy theorist with an anti in front of every word, or a phobia, ism or ist in the back of every word. So they're being bombarded by every angle. Basically, we're losing courage. We're losing guts. And this is why I keep regressing back to standing for principle. And that is the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. Truth, that means you have to have the guts to say the truth and not be willing to be liked for blowing smoke up people's butt. And the third thing, if someone has less consequences for their behavior because of what group they're from, then you get to do it too. And I'm not talking illegal stuff like pedophilia or robbing banks or money laundering or espionage or treason, things of that nature. And people have to realize, and this is one of the reasons why I mention not just ideas and solutions, but I try to give thousands of examples over the years on how the public, the little guy, is being distracted, dumbed down, and divided by groups. You mentioned GM earlier. I didn't have a chance to talk about that. Basically, GM gets bailed out. Not only are they firing thousands of people, but they get bailed out by the taxpayers. And then they do corporate stock buybacks. And then they lay off the little people. And we're sitting here saying, why? Because they're asking unreasonable prices for their products. They close 8 plants. They're $14 billion in debt. All these bonds, these corporations that issue bonds, they're going to be called zombie companies because they won't be able to pay their bonds. And then you have elite aristocrats like Juncker from the EU, and I'm reading from Zero Hedge right now, and it's, quote, and he's upset about stupid populists. It's not populist. They don't even give us concessions. It's survival. See, this is what they do. They have no idea about what the cost is of little things, or the fact that you can't get a job or keep a job based on your hard work, effort, proven results, qualifications, and job performance anymore. It's now by group. These elite aristocrats have no idea about life because they have everybody do the basic daily life skills for them because they're too good to do it and they're too wealthy to care. It's just like immigration, Vince. 1 in 3 caravan migrants have a deadly disease like HIV, AIDS, hepatitis, and tuberculosis. Mm-hmm. Who gets affected by this? It's not the super wealthy sitting in their gated communities or hiring security guards. It's the little people. And when 63% of non-citizens who are on welfare food stamps and 5 million households are taking welfare food stamp programs from ailing American citizens, who pays for it? This is why we need, and I'm going to give an idea and solution right now, we need to stop the BS and do top-down funding. The American, and I talk about this when I talk about QE for the people, which is like a 10-step program to benefit the American people and get our economy back on track. Top-down funding means that every program gets funded not from the bottom 93%, but from the elite. And if we did that, things would change dramatically, I promise you. The American people should vote on how much liquidity and cash flow and money someone has, because all they're doing is taking that money and the.
So we were talking about teachers, and I've got some numbers for you. These are facts. When my dad first was teaching, he was paid $2,400 per year as a teacher. But they paid him an extra $400 because he taught after-school classes, and he was more qualified because he was a science teacher and he could also teach music. So he taught the hard sciences, and he taught music after school, and he was paid $2,400 plus $400 more per year, or $2,800 a year. That was in the 1950s. Today, these underpaid teachers are average compensation across the United States for an underpaid teacher, as they think they are, $58,000 a year. The average compensation or salary for a school is about twice as much, $94,000 a year. So if you're wondering what your school principal makes in a public training camp, about $94,000 a year. How about the superintendent? Well, the superintendent of schools makes about $162,000 a year. That's without retirement, okay? This is without pensions. This is just their salary. So the average superintendent today makes 57 times what my dad made back in the 1950s. The average superintendent today makes more in 1 week than my dad made in an entire year. That's what's wrong with America. So when you hear that teachers, don't seem to be compensated enough, that's nonsense. They work 9 months. Their day begins at about 8 o'clock. Their day ends at 3 o'clock. Now, yes, they have homework to grade, and they have papers to grade, and they have lessons to write, but they work 9 months a year. While most everybody else works 12 months a year and maybe gets a week or two off. Teachers have it made, except for the fact that they are supervising a group of hooligans. Other than that, teachers have it made. At 3 o'clock, they can go home. Think about that. And if a teacher or a principal or a superintendent is in the city of New York or a big city, they make way more than the numbers I just gave you. $58,000 for a teacher, $94,000 for a principal, or $162K for a superintendent. Those are pretty big numbers in my world. Rich?
Oh, absolutely. All you got to do is look at the end product. Are we producing more followers or more thinkers? It's pretty obvious that the young are way more easily socially indoctrinated into a subjective emotional opinion in lieu of objective facts. And that's the way we need to start. See, this all goes full circle. And pardon my redundancy here, folks, but how many times have you heard me say that when we lower the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job and keeping a job based on what group you're in, this metastasizes like a cancer and goes into every aspect of traditions and heritage and culture to lower the bars of standards and expectations. This is what's happening. And you remember my analogy with my high bar analogy that I've mentioned over the air many times, and you regular listeners know what I'm talking about. This is where America is right now. We got to look at the end product. We got to look at the followers versus the thinkers, and we're not doing that. We got to remember, most organizations represent the wealthy. The little guy does not have representation. No one sticks up for us. QE is a great example, which I mention every time. We can't allow the elite to use the term class envy. It has holds no water. It's not legitimate. 95% of QE, quantitative easing, goes directly to the 95% of that goes to the wealthy, the top 1% to 2%. Now the 5, 6, 7% see some of it, but the great majority of it goes to the super wealthy. Every organization is meant to keep the people down and eliminate the opportunities and for us to control our own destiny.
Rich Scheben, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it.
My pleasure,
Our class
buddy.
appreciates it. Class, above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.